Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hello everyone, this is Michael Marchuk, and I'm so glad you've joined me for this session of Generation Digital Workforce. This episode was recorded between John Walden, the Chief Technology Officer for Blue Prism in North America, and Michael Marchuk, the Vice President of Advisory Programs at Blue Prism. We're excited to share this with you to help broaden your perspective on the digital workforce. So recently you were on Government Matters and you brought up this topic of the unified workforce. And I wanted to go into that a little bit deeper. Can you tell me what the unified workforce really is?
Yeah, so the unified workforce, when I talk about it, is really recognizing that it's not so matter what individual is doing work, it's that work needs to be accomplished. And for a lot of companies, that meant offshoring, going to a BPO type organization to accomplish work. With the digital worker, you now have a third sourcing option. And the nice part about this is it's not so much a matter of, as with any other work that you have in your organization, it's not so much a matter of assigning it to one person to do across the entire gambit of a process. It's a matter of understanding that there are different phases of work that need to be accomplished and assigning it to the appropriate resource. And it may go from a human worker to a digital worker. It may go from a digital worker to a human worker. It may go back and forth amongst those depending on what needs to be accomplished. And it's bringing together the different workforces that you have to accomplish work is what it really comes down to.
So when you talk about unified workforce, you are implying that you have both human and digital workers.
Human, digital, temporary, BPO, whatever the case may be. It's unifying it across all of that really to accomplish whatever your mission happens to be.
So when we were talking about human workers, I understand how to manage human workforce. How do you manage a digital workforce, especially in context of this unified workforce concept?
Well, there's two things with regards to management. One is actually acknowledging what they're doing. And that actually is a lot easier from a digital perspective because everything a digital worker does is audited. So you have a history, you have an audit, you have the complete picture of what was really done. The other side of it is now understanding that work has to be transferred back and forth between a human, between a digital, vice versa. That generally ends up being a question of what do you want to end up utilizing to leverage, understand, escalate when one party has not been able to accomplish the work. It can be done via things like BPM solutions. We have a very strong relationship with Appian and several other BPM vendors. It can be done via email. There's a company I know that every time a process starts and goes through it, they keep sending emails. And it creates a lot of emails because when the digital workers are doing work, you've got a lot of information. And what's one thing I always encourage people to consider is not only do you now need to manage the unified workforce, but you need to think about what your data retention policies are because you have a lot more information that you never did have access to before.
Gotcha. So as we're looking unified workforce, again, implies you're still having both humans and digital workers at the same time. There's been some misconception that digital workers are going to replace humans. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, there's a lot of pundits out there who've said, the robots are coming for your jobs. These are the same people who say the sky is falling with every new technology that's coming. The fact of the matter is that we've been doing this for a lot of years so far. Attrition happens. The nice thing about having a digital workforce to be able to manage that work that needs to be accomplished is it can scale appropriately. And it's not a matter of impacting someone's livelihood. It's not a matter of causing them grief before, a holiday and by having to lay them off. What it does give you is that if there is attrition, then you can decide, is this something where I want to apply more digital workers? Is it something that I need to have more humans? It's not ever really been the fact that we've just targeted FTE reductions. Because anytime a digital worker encounters something that it has a problem with, it may not understand, you want to have those humans. So the humans really can focus then on the higher value. And for what we call connected RPA, it's understanding that what we're trying to do is not replace the human, but free them up for their potential.
Okay. So digital workers doing repetitive tasks makes a lot of sense. But as you look at the benefits that some firms have gotten right now, they've started in a small area and gotten a little bit done here, and they've gotten maybe more done in one area, but it's not universal. So as you're looking at this, how can companies take advantage of a digital workforce within their entire organization? Does it require process reengineering or process optimization? What are your thoughts on that?
So early on, we established what we call the robotic operating model. And really what it was designed to do was help give companies a framework to understand how to mature with this technology, as with any other technology that you've had to deal with. Very often we see organizations starting in one area, maybe it's just finance or HR, something that has really defined processes that they know are important, either from a quality perspective, a quantity of work perspective, or a resourcing perspective, as we were just talking about with regards to the attrition. When you end up having that experience, then what you end up having is that you can then determine, according to the vision that you have for your organization, how do you end up distributing it across a wider swath of the fabric? And that's really where it becomes a question of the model that you've set up within the bounds of the robotic operating model, the framework, whether you've gone very centralized or federated from that perspective. It really goes at, more than anything else, the fact that you want to make sure that you have C-level sponsorship, because this is a technology that can have very wide impact. If I looked at something like a trucking company, they're using it to, monitor maintenance plans. If I look at something like a beverage bottling company, they're looking at it from an HR compliance perspective. A lot of companies, consulting companies and otherwise, are using it purely for financial type orchestrations. It has, across every organization, huge capabilities. It's just a matter of getting started. And that's really the one thing I can encourage more than anything else, is get started somewhere, and then it will inevitably grow beyond that area in time.
So I know before you've told me that you start small but think big.
Very much so.
That thinking big part is a challenge sometimes, because oftentimes, as you mentioned, we'll bring into a specific area of the company. You'll bring into finance, or specifically a particular function within finance, maybe in the accounting and reconciliation area. It's fabulous from a transactional perspective, but the teams that work in those areas may not be able to translate how that digital worker can work in the logistics area or other parts of supply chain, or on the front end in maybe the contact center. So when you're doing this, it sounds like there's a lot of planning involved. How do you initiate that kind of planning, especially looking towards that C-level requirement?
Well, there's 2 points I want to make here, is that often planning is hampered by this thought of ownership. And it's a little bit different when you think about this, not so much as a technology as you're going to own, but as a third sourcing option. You have an infinite amount of work capability based upon these technical workers, these digital workers. And that's what you really need to think about, is if I had this, how can I apply it? It's not a matter of, well, I only want to do it from my area. It's how can I get more out of it? Because the ability for them to do work, and we start with a number about 1 to 6. One digital worker should be able to do about 6 FTEs worth of work. That's a huge swath. Sometimes it's a little bit closer to 1 to 3. Sometimes it's a lot more. It depends on the applications it's interacting with. When you're thinking in those terms, what I encourage people to do is, let's say you're going to hire in 5 digital workers. That's really not just 5 digital workers. That's the equivalent of 30 digital workers, or 30 humans. Mm-hmm. Now you have to think about, how am I going to supply them work? How am I going to make sure that they're providing me value? And that's really what drives this thinking beyond just my little task that I have to do. Blue Prism's digital workers are much different than some of our so-called competitors in the fact that it's not so much a assistant that works on my desktop as a force augmenter. It's really a force multiplier, that this is a multiplication factor that you can assign work to and just know it's going to be accomplished. It also has to do with a little bit with regards to our acquisition of Blue Prism Cloud. The fact that we as a company inevitably thought very succinctly about tasks, work queues, schedules. They, in Blue Prism Cloud, are actually thinking far more about SLA orientation. And that SLA orientation really allows you to extend and think beyond individual tasks, individual processes, individual ownership, just to think of the work that you want to accomplish.
You're targeting benefits at the end of the day, rather than simply the tasks that have to be accomplished then.
Value,
Gotcha.
without a doubt.
Gotcha. So another question, maybe the last question, is related to AI and RPA. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about would you bake AI into it? How much AI do you bake into RPA? What are your thoughts on this evolution of RPA to become more intelligent automation, and in this case here, smart digital workers?
So the aspect of intelligent AI or intelligent RPA is rebranding for a lot of people. It's a question of do I try and incorporate everything into one platform? And realistically, I got to tell you that in general, I think that this is a arduous task, because if you or one of your watchers happen to be going through and trying to define AI, you're going to define it probably a dozen different ways. AI only provides value when it's being done within the bounds of a process or task. So if you've got a digital worker going through and looking at a document, and that document now needs to be translated, that is itself that translation is an AI function. If you're reading an email and all of a sudden you need to decide, is this person angry from a customer service perspective? That is a different type of sentiment analysis. Mm-hmm. This also brings back the whole idea of the unified workforce, because all of this AI functionality that we help you really access and gain advantage to from a process orientation ends up always being defined based upon percentages. It's a question of, am I 80% sure of this, or am I only 60%? And if whatever I decide my number is, I probably want to check that with somebody else who's not completely mechanical, who's not digital. And that's where the whole unification comes in. But it becomes a great enabler to help your business users really leverage all the different functionalities that are out there.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for joining us today and Future of Work. I appreciate it. And thank you for all the work that you've been doing in both the government as well as the commercial space.
Not a problem. I appreciate your time.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.